Hi, this is Danny Byrd. This is my humble studio in Bath. This is where I've made my tunes for like the last 13, 14 years. Pretty much everything, all the first albums, Supersized and Ravedigger, Golden Ticket, all the albums have been done here. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how I made the track Devil's Drop. One of the main parts of the tune is the live bass line, the funky bass line, which is actually played by a guy called Pete Joseph, who kind of lives about 20 minutes from here in a town called Radstock, and he's one of the best musicians I've ever come across, and he can play literally every instrument known to man. He brought his bass down, and like I want to go. I guess that's the first thing I want to talk about with how this track was built up, because it did start with the bass line. I don't know why, but I've recorded live bass before, and for some reason it sounds good going through this UA LA 610. I just stumbled across plugging the bass in the DI once, sounded really good. So once you find something that's working for you, you don't change it. So this is like the raw bass before any real processing happened. So you can sort of hear it's like, it is I think the notes, we changed the notes slightly later on. We sort of turned them around because we preferred it that way, but you can hear how dry that is in that take. So that was just what the bass would have sounded like pretty much as we recorded it. One thing that I wanted to add, and a lot of 70s kind of bass had a lot of effects on it and delay, which kind of sounds weird for bass to put a delay on it, but it actually adds a real nice atmosphere to it. Actually, there's a lot of reverb as well, so you can hear that. One thing that sounds really cool on bass is like a little bit of chorusing as well, which I use the micro shift plugin for. It's kind of solo bit of that. So that's like, I don't know, like it's you know, a little bit of delay, a little bit of reverb and chorusing, and then crush the hell out of it, and it's saying like then you get the Devil's Drop bass line basically. I won't actually do that in the actual main session, I'll just do that separately because I want to use as much processing power as I can, and sort of I don't want like 100 tracks to look at, so I'll just have the basic instrumental bounced out as a two track, you know, just a stereo file, so I can record all the instruments on top of that. I like to treat these things like they're a sample, so if you were sampling something from a record, it would already have all those effects on it, etc. You can tell it's got a lot of effects on it, and it's pretty crushed as well, but that gives you that sample feel. On the track, on the bass, is like put a little bit of filtering on it, because it actually gets boring if you hear it twice in a row. So I wanted to, this is a really cool filter, this one. You hear that? It's just like little subtle things like that. For the build up, it's just that bass, you know, it's like the end bass line just repeated and then kind of filtered up. And you can hear it sort of like going in and out. That's because I've got a track spacer plug on it, which if you put that on the bass and you sidechain it to a vocal or something, it will dip those bits when the vocal come in. So that allows like the vocal samples just before the drop to kind of like really have presence. So there's not loads and loads of stuff going on, but you don't lose the bass as well. One thing I did ages ago, one Christmas Eve when I was bored, I imported about 50 different like classic breaks into Logic and timed them all so they were all in the same time. And then it was amazing because you like play one and then you add another one on top of it, and it suddenly became a new break, and it was like real quick to like make an amazing beat. I'll just break down some of the drums on the drop. So this is one of the first breaks. So a lot of these have been high pass, they haven't got any of the low end in them at the moment. A little kick. Now this next break is the most important break in this tune. That one. That's like the sort of stepper, that just gives you the stepping feel. And a little extra snare as well. Yeah, so that like adds it. There's also like 2 different beats in here, because this is like the main one, this is the main stepping one, but then it switches to an amen. Those 2 parts are almost like a switch. The actual bass switch is on as well. So the first bass that I came across, this was like the sort of genesis of the whole idea for the tune, was this type of Hoover bass here. So that's like the main the main bass of the track, which was done in massive. It's just like a typical Hoover. That Hoover sound is quite bassy on its own, but it wasn't enough for the tune, so I added an extra sub from Serum underneath it. So this is the sub. Oh. For the amen part, I wanted a different bass line, so I just it's the same notes, but it's on a different bass. So that is like a sub, but again with two bus ends, adding loads of distortion. So without the distortion, it should sound like this. Yeah, so those. If you don't have that top end on there, it doesn't have the same kind of feel to it, really. It always sounds quite a lot when it's on its own, like all that top end, but when it's in the track, it kind of, you know, you need it there, really. So I also got a couple of vocal samples in it that I used as well. This is from a guy called Cobra from Bristol, and again, like he's like Pete, he comes in and does little vocal samples for me. So we did the same thing here. I said I want a couple of like old school, like almost like rap vocals here.
Funkin' it up, funkin' it up, funkin' it up, funkin' it up, funkin' it up.
Make sure you play this at a high volume.
So again, they're just like, that's him doing like 2 different voices, but you know, it's kind of adds something to the tune and adds a little bit of vibe to it. So this track is like, it, you know, people said it's like definitely a sort of Aphrodite inspired type track. It definitely has that vibe to it. I was definitely like, in a way, people get nostalgic about the 90s, but they talk about, generally when people are talking about, they're talking about the rave stuff or the jungle stuff, which is like, to me, the early 90s or to the mid 90s. As now, as we're getting more into the 10s, I think it's what we call it, the 10s, isn't it? Right? The 10s. I'm getting more nostalgic for 97, 98, 99, which is kind of like what this track has emphasised. Dominic Doran did an excellent video for the track, and if you look on the video, it's got kind of like an old Netscape browser where he's typing in 1999 UK. So that's the kind of vibe that the track is on. And thank you very much for listening to it and watching this.